One, and let's rock, man. All right. Dude, we're back. I think we're going to do a good battle rhythm of this every 2 weeks. My name's Austin. I'm the CEO of Flybodies. And I'll give it over to you, Garrett.
I'm Garrett. I'm a retired intern from Flybodies,
And
recovering intern. No, I had a great experience there. Currently at Harvard Business School, starting off my 2-year MBA program full time.
and
Coming
this
in
is
live from Boston.
and this is bodies in business. So what we talk about here is business ideas, business things, and then also we like to throw in how your health and wellness actually affects your body, or sorry, affects your business, and can help
Mhm.
you over the long term. Essentially, like I think
Yep.
that's our main thesis is that the more that you're able to take care of your body, your brain, all these things, the more likely you are to be successful in business because you give yourself a
Mhm.
longer runway. And it looked like you wanted to hop in there, Garrett. Anything?
No, I just thinking like the lived experience along the way. I know you've been talking about documenting the journey. What Austin and I were chatting about right before we got on this call, before we started recording was you want to speak from your zone of competence, right? Like all the experiences that you have. And so, we see these people that we look up to or consume a lot of their content, like an Alex Hormozy or like a My First Million or All In, right? Like these podcasts or just other people out in the space. And of course, people love to hear the perspective because really what when I listen to some of these things, it's like, okay, how do I do what they did?
For
And there
sure.
is some power in like, hey, here's what I did, but like when you reflect back, the human bias is to create a narrative that makes sense, not to actually explain what happened,
Totally.
what really did happen. So a lot of this is like, yeah, Flybodies is not the company that you envision yet. I'm not doing the things in my career or whatever yet, but like this is a really fun way to kind of document what we're going through as a way to just show the behind the scenes, and if this ever becomes useful to somebody else, then that's great. But honestly, this is just a fun time to chat with you, AO, about all the stuff that we're thinking about that we've been through. And that reminded me of a story. So this Bodies in Business was not our first attempt at a podcast, and it's definitely also not your first attempt at a podcast. You can maybe lean into some of the other ones, but fall of 2019, I'm sitting outside a yellow mushroom, no, a mellow
No,
mushroom in Montgomery, Alabama.
don't eat the
So I'm
yellow
at
mushroom.
Squadron Officer School. Um, I'm at Squadron Officer School, which is the course for captains in the Air Force to get some leadership training, and it's like a professional development opportunity. And so, obviously, the worst space physically for a podcast, right? I'm sitting next to a busy street in downtown Montgomery,
A lot of
and I got
noise.
like headphones in, like my iPhone headphones or something. I'm just literally just on like Zoom with you, and we're like recording the audio.
Yeah.
And I was super hesitant to like do this podcast because the idea that you had at the time was, hey, let's just talk about the academy. Let's interview like people who went to the Air Force Academy. You and
Hmm.
I both graduated from there, and it just as a way to show people that maybe considering this as a path or currently at the Air Force Academy or in the Air Force itself as like, hey, how do we navigate our careers as officers? And the zone of competence thing is something that I've struggled with because like I want to talk about where I'm headed,
Hmm.
but there's a little bit of like there's pride or just how am I supposed to hypothesize about what I would do versus like just talking about what I've done, and it seems
Right.
so small. But I have come around. You've convinced me on the value of talking about past experience. So I think we're going to talk about a bit of that today, like my past experience in the Air Force and kind of like my journey a little bit. And it is, although small and maybe not like the big sexy, like billion-dollar company story or all these other things, but like I'm not diminishing my experiences. I just think that I didn't consider them as useful as they could be to
Totally.
somebody. So I hope that somebody out there, even if you're not at the Air Force Academy, considering that going into the military at all, trying to get an MBA, doesn't matter. I hope that you can take something from our lived experiences and also just like recognize that your experiences, the listeners out there, they're valuable, right, to somebody. So sharing your story is always a powerful thing.
See, I love that. And I'm glad that you see that sharing your experience right now because I think it's super helpful for people, especially people that haven't made it yet. Like there's still room for me to grow, room for you to grow, but we have
Yes.
done some things in our life up to this point, and we look at that, or at least I look at that, and I'm just like, oh, it's not that big of an accomplishment when you look at Alex Hormozy, Mark Zuckerberg, uh, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. When you look at those people, you're just like, gosh, like what have I done, right? And I think that's where both of us kind of hesitate on telling our story, because we're like, we haven't built $1 billion company, so who's going to want to hear this? But I think when I step back and I go, man, one, if I do this for myself and maybe even for my kids, so that they know, oh man, this is what Austin was like back then, and I'm having the same exact thoughts, and or I'm having similar thoughts, and I'm going through something similar, and I want to know how he handled it, just to learn from. Maybe I'll do it the same way, maybe I won't do it the same way, but at least I can hear somebody that was kind of going through something similar. And you
Yep.
don't have to be going through building a SpaceX company to feel like you're accomplished, right?
No.
It's like the little things that I think we're going to talk about today are going to be helpful for the average person that is actually being a teacher, or going into college or something like that. So
Yeah.
I'm super pumped. And I didn't even know about the 2019. There's so many things that I've like
You
tried to
blocked it
start,
out.
or like that fizzled out, or like something. When you told me that to me, I was like, no way. I always try to start in 2019. Okay, well now we're following through. I will say, I want to hop on that like that thing real quick and say, like, the first time you do anything is usually not going to work as planned, and you're going to learn from it. And if you keep making attempts and redoing it, like he said, the first time he tried to do this was in a Mellow mushroom. Now we are in both hopefully very silent places where we can both think and
Yeah.
record this thing. And it's like, and looking back, you're like, what was I thinking? Or like, even for me, like when I wanted to schedule something with him, it was like, like Mellow mushroom is probably not a good idea, but I still want to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it was like the act of doing it. It's fun that you remember that, but also it's just like, okay, now we've learned that we have to like actually set aside time to do this. So cool, man.
Yep.
Anything you wanted to add to that before we jump in?
No, I like your just push to try something. The idea of something is always different than what it actually feels like and
Hmm.
experiences like. And so, you know, a podcast, I'm like, so many people are doing podcasts. I'm like, we're never going to be uh, Lex
My first
Friedman,
million.
right? Like, My First Million. And you know, like you look, and one of the things that Austin, that you love to remind me of is like if you go back and listen to the OG first
It's
episodes of a
so
lot of
funny.
these things that are big now, they're just not very good. You know, like they're not recording in the best spaces, and that's fine because
Hmm.
one, I think especially in My First Million case, right? Sean and Sam are just great storytellers.
For sure.
Um, and so they focus on producing like quality stuff. So, anyways, I appreciate you for jumping on here, and I hope that this is useful to us and other people in the future. Um,
Yeah, man. Let's
but
jump
yeah,
in. Let's jump into
what's
these
on your
topics
yeah
really quick so that we can
yeah
basically give some. So going in, I just want to ask that first question is, what lessons did you learn from being a teacher at the academy? Like, what are
yep
the maybe top 3 lessons that you learned?
yeah. Um, so my journey of graduating in 2015, I knew that I was going to come back and teach at the Air Force Academy. I'd applied into this program as a senior or as a first class cadet with the Department of Computer Science, that they would sponsor me for my master's degree, and then I would do the school, do an operational tour in the Air Force, and then come back. So I already knew that that was in my path.
How did that feel?
Um,
Just curious, like planning out like the
I felt
first
great.
5 to 7 years of your career.
So in the military, there is like you're a person in the machine, right? The military is made to handle the middle 90%,
Okay.
right? So the middle 90% is this HR machine that if you don't do anything, you're going to go to your first assignment, and then they're going to give you a notification, hey, you're going to move in a year. Put in your preferences, and then that's some illusion of choice that you have, and you'll put in your preferences, and the machine will gonkulate and then spit out an assignment, and you'll say, great, I'll take that. I'll go to the next thing, and you can have a great career in the military doing that. But I've seen the people who are most successful are those that take control and are applying into programs
Hmm.
that essentially can control where they go or what they do. And so it felt great for me to know with some certainty where I was going to head. And I really wanted to teach. That's why I applied. I got a lot of value from my instructors that were captains at the time, and I really looked up to them
Do
for
you have like a
mentorship.
particular, sorry, do you have a particular one that you're like, man, that's the guy I want to be like? Because I'm just wondering, because that is a,
Yeah.
it's like becoming a pilot, right? Whenever you sign on that dotted line and become a pilot, like next 10 to 12 years of your life, you're like, hey, I'm locked into this. And that's having that long view back then. I don't know. Did you have, I'm saying like when you were a senior at the academy, did you still have the same view of like, oh, this is why I did it. And it actually worked out. Cause that's what it's just
Yeah.
interesting.
So admittedly, part of applying to that program is that those grad school slots often are at civilian institutions, meaning like I could have gotten selected to go to Georgia Tech or
UCLA.
Virginia or
Yeah.
UCLA, great like data science programs that are out there, and I wouldn't, wear this when I go to school and get paid to go
Okay.
to school. It's an
Yeah. So
amazing
you kind of
program.
wanted to maybe go to regular college for a little bit, and that was part because some people get to do
Yeah,
that. That's kind of cool. Yeah.
yeah. And so thinking macroeconomic time frame, like 2014 into 2015 was a time of budget cuts within the military,
Okay.
and so there wasn't the same appetite for spending money in the same way, and so I was selected to go to the Air Force Institute of Technology,
Beautiful,
and
beautiful campus.
it's a great
Beautiful.
institution, right? Out in, Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and honestly, like I really just I wanted to teach and I wanted to go to grad school, and so that was a way for me to do both of those things. And the reason why I wanted to teach is I had some professors, especially in computer science, that the classes were about a topic. So like Jeremy Noel is a guy, so he's now retired, lieutenant colonel at the time. We took a class on quick turn analysis. So this is imagine you're in some data analysis unit or just like you're being asked to do some sort of like, hey, solve this problem with some data. You have until tomorrow to figure it out. And so you're kind of just pulling together what you can and trying to present some reasonable, actionable, data supported plans to a senior leader. But Colonel Noel, he made this thing more about like how do you think navigating the soft skills. Like, yeah, there's technical skills, but it's way more important as somebody in any environment to be able to communicate effectively. Like you could do the best, most technical analysis, but if you can't convince people or persuade people or get buy-in, then you'll just never be effective. And so I really respected him for like broadening my perspective on kind of like what it means to be an operations research analyst in the
That's cool.
military, and that's what the career that I ended up doing. So
That's really
he's
cool.
one example of many that I was like, okay, this guy is great at teaching, makes this class fun. I
Mhm.
want to do that and
Very
give
cool.
back and like help in the mentorship way.
Yeah, I think that the lesson from that teacher, from what I heard you just say, is like just because you have the correct data doesn't mean you don't have to be able to convey the message so that people understand and want to follow that data. Like
And buy in, yeah,
and buy-in. Like I think that's huge. That's very cool. Like that was just to piggyback off that a little bit. When I was an acquisitions officer here in LA, when I first got here, one of the main things that the upper leadership, the colonels, lieutenant colonels, wanted the younger second lieutenants and captains to do was basically give briefings on what was going on in the programs because they wanted you to learn how to convey a message. And I wasn't very
hmm
good. Like my heart was beat out of my chest because I was just
yeah,
like, I don't know this super well. Like there's this engineer that could talk about this for days, and you have me up here trying to explain it in 15 minutes. So that's really cool. I'm glad he like had that as a talking
yeah,
point for him. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So being a teacher at the academy, what did you impart that type of wisdom onto others? Is that something that you
Yeah.
really conveyed to your students?
Yeah, so it's funny. There's a couple things. One, I didn't realize how much of teaching that role as a teacher is not teaching. So there's
Wow.
the in-class portion, but there's a lot of preparation that goes outside of that that I had no skill in terms of curriculum development or lesson planning. That was a lot. That was very difficult because
Hmm.
I kind of relied upon my ability to just kind of talk off the
To
cuff, and I
wing
did
it.
decently with that, wing it. So there's a lot more work to put in there. And then there's also there's also two things. One is all learning is self-learning. So as opposed to this idea of I'm going to get up in front of the classroom and just fucking like just espouse all this knowledge and then it's just going to go right into the students' brains. If there's no engagement or buy-in or wish to get the knowledge, then it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
And I actually, by talking, am not going to impart very much. So it's a lot more about getting somebody to discuss an idea or to just practice problems, and we can discuss it along the way. That's where I found the most value. So I had to really change up my teaching style. And in the same way, for mentorship, you've been in a room before where somebody that is senior or like has this lived experience, like, let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about this time that, and like if the student is not ready, the
Hmm.
teacher will not appear, right? So once the student is ready, the teacher will appear, meaning if a student is looking for mentorship and guidance, they will either posture themselves in a certain way, like ask certain questions, come seek me out for advice. But I found like I was a lot of my lessons that I was trying to teach were falling on deaf ears because students were just not ready to hear those lessons or they weren't asking to hear those. And I reflect on that. Like, I don't know if you feel this way as a cadet. Like, we had all these people like trying to give us perspective about what the real Air Force looks like and, making decisions. And I just couldn't internalize those messages. I wasn't ready, but the seeds were planted back then. And then many, many years later, through like lived experience, I was like, oh, that's what they were trying to convey to me. So I think that I had expectations of having a lot more impact all the time, but it was really, it came in spurts, and I had to develop relationships with the students in a way that there was trust, and only some of those students would end up kind of seeking that deeper level of mentorship that ended up being fruitful at the end of my time at the academy.
And so did you feel like you found did you have the same experience like with your students as you had with your instructor, like with that lieutenant colonel or when you were there?
Yeah, I had some positive experiences like in the large settings, meaning like a classroom of like 20 students, right? Where they gave me feedback, hey, that was interesting, that was fun. I really appreciate the way that you teach and trying to like learn some bigger lessons and had some discussions on that. But one area that I didn't really lean into that well was seeking out mentorship early on. Meaning
As a teacher,
no, as a student. I
as a
didn't do
student.
that.
Okay,
I
okay.
didn't do that as a student.
Yeah.
So what I realized the value in is mentorship is a two-way street. It's a relationship built around intentional development where there's buy-in from both parties. Not just like, hey, I'm seeking advice, but like buy-in to say, hey, we're gonna talk through life together and figure out what decisions you're trying to make and see if I can help, uh, open some doors or give some more constructive like development over time that I didn't actually seek out any senior mentorship in my career until kind of far too late in it, where I was like not seeking out a mentor. And because it goes both ways, I think people assume that, well, good leaders will just like come and find me if I'm like a young person in a junior person in an organization. They'll develop me, and it's like no one's going to care about you as much as you care about you. And if you don't signal or go ask, that's like kind of an awkward conversation. Hey, will you be my mentor? Um, because then there's an opportunity for rejection there. And so I actually realized that I hadn't sought that out and how valuable it was that had the opposite I had the opposite experience where I sought people out that said, "Hey, you seem inquisitive about kind of life stuff. Do you want to like talk more about that?" And then and eventually like said, "Hey, I want to form a mentorship." And I'm kind of like the person that's like, "I want to make this very clear about what this is about." So that they knew how serious I was about it. And that ended up being very fruitful. I had a few, by the end of my time, there were about four people that I met with pretty regularly that would have like extended conversations about life, about their career decisions, about all sorts of things that I didn't have when I was a cadet.
And that makes sense, man. Like understanding that a cadet at that age is probably a little more hesitant to do that because they don't even know, right? Like, and it's awesome that you recognized. It sounds like you recognized that when kids were asking more of a question, to say like, oh, like this person already asked these questions. They probably have more questions to ask just about life, about anything. So being the teacher, being the older person and recognizing, hey, they're probably not going to ask me to be their mentor. So let me go up to them and say, hey, would you like to, learn more about, the Air
Yep.
Force or life and stuff like that? That's awesome, man. That's really cool. I think, dude, I was not in the headspace at all to ask for a mentor at the academy just because obviously you have a million things going on, right? School, sports, staying in shape, like, and then on the weekend, it's just like there's so many things going on. So I think to your point, it's definitely up to the adult, the older adult, the teacher or somebody in that role to kind of reach out if they see a kid that's doing that.
Yeah. So and now I want to flip that and say, if you are in an organization, anyone listening, and you don't have a mentor in your career field, in your space, in your job day to day, I think there are lots of people who have that posture. They would want to help, they would want to be your mentor, but you can do a lot to seek out those people, ask them formally to be like, hey, well, I'm looking for advice on this, and make it really easy for them to be your mentor, meaning like any informational interviews or coffee chats, networking kind of stuff that you're doing, building a mentorship relationship with somebody that you're interested in learning from. If you come in prepared to say, hey, I see you as this kind of person in this career field, I've really valued this kind of thing. Here are some stuff, like give them, make it really easy for them versus saying, hey, I need help. You can really maximize the time that you have with people, especially they're quite busy, right? Like everyone's kind of busy.
For sure.
And the high value things that you don't, they're non-promotable activities, right? That are like mentorship is not going to get you promoted, but it
Right.
might help that other person get promoted. And so I'd say
Yeah.
seek out somebody and make it really easy for them to give you valuable advice by, like, preparing for meetings and say, hey, here's my resume. I would love for you to look over this. Like these kinds of things that uh, go a long way in somebody saying yes and make it an easy yes for somebody to meet with you. And then maybe that relationship can develop further.
For sure. And to kind of go a little different if honestly you don't have anybody that you relate with in your office or in like your immediate like, you know, area that you can't talk to anyone. Like I will say like now that there's podcasts and books and all these things where you can like listen to people that you want to learn more from, like that helped me tremendously. I feel like and like I said, I was pretty introverted, but I enjoy listening to the books and podcasts and stuff with people that I kind of look up to because then I can learn from them. And yeah, it's they're not obviously mentoring me like personally, but hearing their advice and what they've gone through and stuff like that is super helpful, especially if it's something where you want to go in that direction and you're like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do this. But yeah, there's so many good books, and I've heard before people say like you should read biographies, right? Because those are the best things you can learn from people who have done things in their lives, and it's just super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, man, dude, I definitely I wanted to kind of like piggyback off that in case you didn't have anybody in your area where like, man, I just don't
Yeah.
relate to anybody that's
Yep.
around. But that's the first thing you should do, right? Is like like if you're working with somebody day to day, like finding that person and finding somebody you can kind of like jive with and want to learn from. That's your first bet, and then
Mhm.
kind of go to the podcast stuff if you don't, and still do that in general. But anyways, so okay, nice, man. I think those are super helpful bits of information about mentors and finding one and actually being a good mentor and stuff like that. I wanted to jump to do you remember at the academy like one of the toughest moments of your life
Mhm.
and or one of the happiest moments? These are very extreme, very extreme, and I'm doing these
Yeah.
on purpose because I'm like, oh man, because you want to hear
Yeah.
people go through their crappiest points in their lives, and then also like they're
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah. So both as a cadet, but and as a teacher, I'll take it as like the instructor that the hardest times across the board, no matter what experiences I've been in, have been times for personal courage in which I didn't actually step up to the plate. So an example of this is in computer science. and many other subjects, right? It's a difficult subject, and it's hard to figure out, but it's also a kind of subject where you could just like take somebody else's answer and use it for your own and get away with it sometimes.
Hmm.
And so I had instances of students that were either using unauthorized resources like, hey, outside the scope of like, I don't know, ChatGPT to solve their problems,
Gotcha.
or passing off somebody else's work as their own and having to confront students about that to say, hey, like, with an open mind, not assuming malintent,
Right.
hey, this looks pretty strange. Can
Similar.
you explain this? And yeah, and then there's like a dynamic there, especially at the Air Force Academy and other service academies or institutions where there's an honor code
Hmm.
where you're upheld to a very high standard of submitting your own work and being honest and not cheating and all these things. That there was a student in my last semester teaching that uh, basically on an exam, they could not have gotten the solution that they got if they were not using ChatGPT.
Got it.
And I had this
Got it.
conversation with them, and it was uncomfortable. And I really wanted to give this person the benefit of the doubt. And I actually left the interaction realizing that I didn't prepare enough for how uncomfortable I would
Ooh.
feel in the interaction.
Wow. Okay.
And so me being
Was it uncomfortable?
my
Was it
personality,
uncomfortable because like you knew, like in the back of your mind, you're like, I know he did this, and
yep, yep,
was he telling you or she telling you like I didn't do this, like
yep,
definitely did,
yep,
and it's like
yep,
I can't be like you did this, just say you did it, and I won't no
yeah.
repercussions, like
Yep.
like
So there's a negotiation aspect to it, which is asking good questions that would essentially elicit information versus saying, if I say, did you cheat? No, of course, right? Like you're just going to say no because especially in the cases where the very strict honor code, if you say yes, well, then that leads you down a path of, hey, let's investigate this, and you might end up getting academic punishment or
right.
restricted or, on
No one wants
probation
that.
or even kicked out,
Hmm.
right? And nobody wants that, right? So the incentive's there. And so I didn't anticipate how stressful that conversation was going to be for me. I
Hmm.
knew that individual, their perspective, but in the moment, as I like have this high care for my students, I didn't prepare well enough to be able to like actually ask the really smart questions
Got it.
and to be able to like help this person kind of like come clean. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, there's no way. And in the moment, I was actually rationalizing away from the things that I kind of knew to be true. And I left the situation saying, okay, I'll trust you. And then like for 3 days afterwards, I'm like sitting there thinking, oh, they said this, but then there's this piece of evidence that it just doesn't sit right.
Ugh.
And based on the way that the process goes, like there's kind of no double jeopardy aspect that like I realized that I made a bad judgment call because I in the moment allowed my care for somebody and my empathy to get in the way of doing what was right.
Mm.
And actually, the best thing that I could have done for this person was hold them accountable, and I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's those are tough situations, right? Like, I mean, you just explained it, how uncomfortable it can be. And like, you don't like, extreme, he could be getting kicked out of the academy. Lowest level, it's like, okay, you get an honor hit and then you're on academic probation or something like that. Right. But and so as a, emotional human being, you're just like, I don't want that for somebody that, that I'm trying to give the opportunity to come clean. So it's like, I guess for someone that, either a teacher or a student, what would you say? Like you kind of talked about it, but you're like, hey, do a little more prep work to understand what kind of questions you need to answer, you
Mm-hmm.
need to ask, so that they maybe feel comfortable saying, okay, yes, I use this, or like, because you want to lead them down the path of saying like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like I might have done this and this is how we can handle it. I don't know, like maybe giving them like some type of reassurance that you say, if this happened, you're not going to get kicked out or something, like I don't know if you can promise
Yeah,
that.
I know I can't promise the sanctions
Right.
piece. Um, I think honestly, there's two things. It's kind of like it's everything's a negotiation in that case. I hadn't clearly defined, so I did an okay job at eliciting kind of like, hey, what can you explain this? But I didn't clearly define. if I'm not able to get clear answers on these things, then
Mhm.
that means to me that I have some level of doubt that I need to
Right.
pursue this
Okay.
further.
Got it.
And so it's a little bit more like, like in a deal situation, like, well, what am I willing to accept, right? And
Hmm.
so um, I think that it informed other conversations that I had with other students in the same time frame after the fact, where I was not assuming, but I would just like allow them to speak, and then I would and kind of like really actively listen and kind of just critically assess, like, is what they're telling me true? Can I have them explain it in a way that makes sense to me? And if it's not, then to probe further and to say, well, that actually doesn't lead me to be more confident in whether or not you did this,
Right.
and so I'm going to need to pursue it further.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it ultimately comes down to the prep work of just like anticipating the emotional struggle that I knew I would experience, and then mitigating that by like giving myself the conditions by which I would say, okay, I don't feel convinced at this point, and now I'm going to leave the conversation and I'll pursue this further with the sanctions kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and
Um,
that's tough, man. That's honestly, and you don't really. That's I really enjoy this conversation aspect because it's like, man, no one really talks about that about being a teacher at the academy. Is like, oh, like you're probably going to run into this at some point, right? And how do you handle it, right? No one necessarily sits you down and says, all right, so you're going to want to really, really listen to this person. And if you feel doubt, like I think that's super helpful for somebody that's going to be, because
yeah,
it's not like you're 20 years older than these kids, right? I say
no,
kids because they're 18, 19, 20, 21, and you're only what, 27, 28, 29, maybe
yeah,
like, and so you still feel like, okay, like I don't want to ruin this kid's life. Right.
yep,
And you're not, obviously, hopefully you're not trying to,
yeah.
but yeah.
No,
So that's
no,
interesting.
the holding somebody accountable, it can be applied to a lot of different settings. Like you have a friend, or somebody you're in a relationship with, or somebody that works for you, and you're trying to hold them accountable to something that, relying upon just kind of like gut and instinct, unless you're like really skilled in this area, is kind of a recipe for disaster,
Mhm.
because the conversation will unfold in a way that, in order to stay on kind of like on task, as well as to like keep in mind what's my ultimate goal here. And like the ultimate goal for both of us, the shared goal, is common understanding and repaired trust. And also maybe in the end is, okay, well, maybe you did something that was outside of the accepted standards, and so therefore the best thing for this person is not to be kind to them in that way. It is actually to be, more constructive by, like I said, holding somebody
Yeah,
accountable for
yeah,
their
and
actions.
holding somebody accountable. You never know how it's going to end up, but it's like, hey, the reason why we hold people accountable in this is because we don't want you to do it again, right? It's something, and
It,
further, like we don't want you to go into the Air Force and do something, or go into any type of situation and do
mhm,
something that is not aligned with the law, with certain things. So it's
yep,
like you're trying to teach a person to follow the rules at the end of the day, like basic principles,
yeah,
right?
yep,
So that's interesting. Like it goes back. It made me think of how your teacher that you looked up to is like conveying the message, and communication is so important here because technically you did have the data, kind of like to say like
mhm,
this person probably did this, but like being able to have those questions and have the ability to communicate clearly and ask the right questions is super important. That's
yeah,
interesting, man. I like that perspective. And you know, I can't speak. I never committed any honor violations. But um, I did sit on one honor um, board, and it was super uncomfortable. So it was just like, you hear the story, and you're just like, the teacher says one thing, the student says another thing, and it was just like, God, like you don't want to be the one to be the
mhm,
bad guy, right?
yeah.
So yeah, it's tough.
And so here, I'll take this this is a recent lesson that we've been learning or trying to talk over in my leadership class here at HBS. So the past two lessons, we watched the movie 12 Angry Men,
Hmm.
and I'd never seen it before. It's an older film released in the 50s, I think, and the backdrop is there is a kid on trial for murder, and there's a panel, a jury panel of 12 people that go back into the jury room to deliberate, and the initial vote is 11 guilty, one not guilty. And all the 11 people are just convinced that this person's guilty. They are either tired, they just kind of want to get out of there. Like they have different kind of incentives for how they're voting. And the one person who stands up to take an ethical stand is like, hey, this is somebody's life we're dealing with here. In the case, it's like a murder would result in an automatic death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to consider this very strongly. And just like the moral courage it takes to like stand up, especially against multiple people, is insane. So it's something that I know I'm going to continue to work on in my life. That anticipating, if you don't plan ahead for like moral ethical challenges when you're in the moment, like you saw, like my incentives or just kind of like how I felt, it like led me astray from something that I actually at the end of the day don't I can't look myself in the mirror and say, yes, I think I did right
For
by
sure.
that person.
No, and I've been there.
So,
Yeah, that it's tough,
yeah,
and that doesn't mean you just in both situations. That doesn't mean you can't do align, make the decision align with your ethics and morals in the future, because of how it makes you feel, and you're reflecting on it, and you're like, man, that just didn't feel good. Like I can't do that again, right? Like
it's a learning experience for me in
for
that
sure.
circumstance with the student. And so, like I said, it informed future interactions that I had with cadets on the same topic, and it, just me as a leader in general, wanting to uh, help people. I think it's a very difficult thing to do if you think that maybe the best thing to help somebody is to help them move on
Hmm.
from an organization or to help them learn and grow at like low stakes before they get themselves into a lot more trouble at high stakes.
For sure, and where the repercussions are a lot bigger
A
and
lot
more
worse.
impactful for your life. And so yeah, I think, gosh, man, there's so many times at the academy where you're like, you feel like I'm just so overwhelmed a lot of times where I have to perform, I have to get an A, or I have to, do this, that, and the other, or like I need to get back to the academy because I'm going to be at curfew or something like that. Like there's so many instances where you find yourself like in a dilemma, right? And so that's where I think it's just tough. Like I think that's good information for people to have is like it's never like it's never like 0 or 1. It's always a gray area on like is this the best decision I can make in the moment? So I think
Yeah.
that bit of information is super helpful for anybody who's a teacher or a student going to the academy is like, hey, you're going to have some tough decisions. Obviously, you got to lean one way or the other where you think the right thing to do is. And then you just learn from that. No one's
Yep.
going to, hopefully, no one like just completely crushes your world just because you made one, seemingly like small decision so that so you can learn from that. I think that's super helpful, man.
Mhm.
Cause those are the gray areas that people don't really talk about as being super heavy. Cause everybody's like, oh, like you got to go through basic training. You gotta, work super hard and get your job and stuff like that. It's like these, moments are very helpful, I think.
Mhm.
Well, dude, so jumping to another topic, I know we're just, we talk for a while and then, I like, there's so many topics to get to on these things. So it's like, I want to jump to, we both watched this video, about these 6 disciplines of strategic thinking.
Mhm.
I find it, those types of things super helpful for me because trying to run a company and putting that company in the right direction so that the day-to-day operations that I'm doing and the week-to-week things are moving the company forward to our overall goal of building a successful, profitable company that grows, at a fairly relatively good rate. And so this video just talked about, hey, these are the 6 things that you need to have as a strategic thinker. And I'll go over them really quick. And then I want to kind of talk, I'll let you pick one and I'll pick one to kind of talk about. But the 6 things are pattern recognition, systems analysis, mental agility, structured problem solving, visioning, and then political savvy. And we can put the video down below if you guys want to watch it. It's like it's maybe 8 minutes long or something like that. But it's super helpful because you're just like, man, all these things make a big difference on your overall strategic thinking. And as you get older, if you want to have a position in a high position at a company or in the military or anywhere, you have to be able to think about the bigger picture. And that's what strategic thinking is, right?
Hmm.
Making sure that the things you're doing day to day are moving you in the direction that you want to go overall in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So Garrett, if you want to go first, if you want to pick the first
Yeah.
one, I'll wait for you.
Yeah. So the thing that I found most interesting about the list here is there's a few that are internal, right? Like it's a skill to develop that you can a way of thinking, of frameworks, how you can approach problem solving that will lead you to be more strategic than tactical. Like, you and I chatted before we jumped on and started recording here about, hey, like, is this the right decision? A or B is one thing, but like considering are A and B the only options, or like are A and B any good as options? I think that I want to talk more about the later ones, which seem like they're a little bit less of a skill and more of a external facing thing. So visioning and political savvy.
Mm-hmm.
So visioning, and that's the thing that I'm like, oh man, I don't have like the vision of like where the future should go.
Yeah.
Um, it's just just a difference uh, in how you spend your time. That as a strategic thinker, as a leader, if I am not allocating enough time to do this visioning thing or the external relations of like, hey, how do I navigate this environment? Then you're actually never going to break yourself out of the slog of the day to day.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to pick your head up a little bit and think about are the things that I'm actually focusing on the right things? And whether or not I've experienced in my life, whether or not I'm actually doing the right things is something, a question that's always in the back of my mind. And I realize that if I don't set aside time for reflection, then I just feel that pain of like, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the right things?
Mm-hmm.
Versus when I take some time to step back and reflect and do some of that visioning, then I feel like I'm like, okay, either, yes, I'm confirming, or I might get some new ideas about how I'm spending my time. And one of those in my current life is at HBS or at any business school, you come in and you have some classes, but then, very shortly after school starts, there's this process of recruitment. So recruiting for a job, all these different companies, different function areas like, consulting, investment banking, different industries, they'll come to town. And your whole job, like sorry, your task, not your job, is to lock in a summer internship. That's your job. Now, there are so many things coming at us all the time, all these different events you could go to. Should I go to the consulting coffee
Mm-hmm.
chats? Should I explore careers in sports or health and wellness or consumer packaged goods? And it's like, if I'm just like looking at it from the level of which one should I do out of these 10 options, that's not strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is backing off and saying, like, what types of opportunities am I looking for? What do I want to end up like? What do I want my day to day to look like? Um, Not like necessarily I'm going to plan out a perfect career option, but it's more like thinking bigger picture about what I want my life to look like and what skills that I have and what I want to develop. And
Like 5 to 10 years from now, like the decision you made to be a teacher
yeah,
at the academy, like you were
yeah,
like, oh, this is going to be 7 years from now, I'm going to be back at the academy teaching. So
yep,
like that was like a strategic effort that you had that
yep,
you're like, okay, that's where I know I'm going. I'm going to be there.
yep.
So now you're
So
trying to do that now.
you've given myself some time to like back up and pick
Hmm.
characteristics of career paths versus just choosing between one of like 24 options
Right.
of what I could do on this Monday afternoon for recruiting. I'm going to be a lot better off in the end because I will have chosen the correct ladder to climb. And I know there's like this analogy, like, is your ladder even on the right wall?
Hmm.
Is kind of this analogy of like, you can run really fast in any direction you want and be really busy. And the thing that I've struggled with and I'm learning is taking time to assess what is the right direction for me to head in. And then the micro decisions I'll kind of navigate along the way. So
Right.
I'm kind of losing, the whole ladder analogy, but you don't want to find yourself having ran in a direction that was not very thoughtfully considered and you're making tons of progress. And then by the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, you look over and like my ladder's on the wrong wall.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that visioning process is a different use of time than some of these tactical things about like how your mental agility in the moment, right, is useful to navigate. But I think that the that's what I think about when I think about strategy is visioning.
That's
I
cool.
don't know for you, like what of those six do you like most resonate with you, or you had something like that stuck out?
So I'll piggyback off the visioning first for me, and then I'll go into one that I really liked. But visioning, so like the what I see as visioning for me is like I the is a big problem, big hairy or big hairy problem, right? Because that's going to take a long time to try and solve, even if it is possible to solve, right? It's like AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence is a big, hairy problem. Solving climate change, right? Or not solving it, but like working on climate change, right? Those are big problems. Mine is right now the obesity epidemic, and is on the rise, and it's been on the rise for 30, 40, 50 years. And that is my vision, is to like help try to turn that ship and say, oh, like obesity is going down, and and figuring out a way to do that on a global scale, right? Like, and that sounds pretty audacious, right? It's like, whoa, like you're thinking that. And so, but so that's my vision, is like, man, we have enough information, enough knowledge, and we have enough resources that people should not have to live obese lives, because it's tougher for them to move around, to do things, to live longer lives. And I'm not saying like you're a terrible person for being obese. No, by no means are you that. But we have enough knowledge these days to be able to try to prevent that and to make it go down. So that's like my visioning. And then on my day to day is like how, being in the health and wellness space, I am working towards that vision, right? I don't know if I'm always making the best moves to be able to curb obesity for the entire world, but I like that is overall for me when I think about why it gives me peace of mind to say, oh, you're doing classes at schools, you're giving wellness presentations, you're doing mileage challenges. All of these things are helping people in the health and wellness space. And so like for me, it gives me peace of mind that I'm like, hey, I don't know if I'm doing the right stuff, but I know I'm heading in the right direction if people are losing weight, are having better times and stuff like that. So like that's how I see it, is like I think that helps me to have like a huge problem like that to be my vision, so that I can go, oh man, like that's what I'm working toward. That's the overall. I don't know if I'll ever curb it or do it, but like that's what I'm trying to do, so that it gives me peace of mind of like saying I can work in that direction. Just wanted to kind of piggyback off that, because I think picking that big problem helps with the vision. Man, pattern recognition. I like this because so I help out my younger brother with his football team. And dude, when you're watching film, it's all about pattern recognition, right? It's all about what is the other team doing consistently, so that you can prepare for them to stop what they're doing on the next week, right? And I think pattern recognition it's probably, it could be maybe the simplest of all the things, because you're like, oh wait, that keeps happening, that keeps happening, that keeps happening, and so like it's a simple thing, but it's something that is very learnable in my opinion. And if you can start seeing patterns, you start seeing patterns everywhere, and you can apply it to many different things in life, where it comes to like, oh, like Austin eats eggs and potatoes every morning, and then also like two to three times a week eats oats, rolled oats. I know that's like very granular, but it's like, man, having the ability to look at situations and understand patterns is super, super important. And I'll give you, so I gave you the example of my brother's team, and like I played football growing up. So I was always looking for patterns when I was playing football. And like, if you play sports, you're always looking for tendencies, looking for patterns, looking for things that teams do so that you can be prepared for the next thing. So in like business, I am seeing a pattern with the mileage challenges that we do, where in the beginning we had like a lot of people be super excited for like the first week, maybe 2 weeks, and then a lot of people drop off because they're not super excited about it. But now we're putting in mini challenges week to week and on the weekends so that people stay motivated. And then I actually talked to my cousin at Holy Innocents yesterday, and he was like, because you talked about this, Garrett, of having a percentage of growth per person, right? And just being like, oh, like Sally walked 5 miles last week. This week she walked 10 miles. That's 100% increase, right? But let's say Joe only walked 8 miles and then walked, 9 miles the next week. Well, he only had a, 16% increase or something like that, right? Whereas Sally doubled her
Mhm.
mileage output. And so seeing the pattern recognition with the mileage challenges to help people stay engaged, to help people
Yes.
want to continue doing that, and saying, "Go, okay, how can we change this in order to get more engagement?" And so I really like the pattern recognition one because you can apply that to a lot of little things and big things in life. And like, and if you can do that well, then you can make better decisions, in a lot of places in life. So pattern recognition was a bigger one. I will say, excuse me, talking a lot. I feel like, so I remember I heard an episode where Joe Rogan kept like clearing his throat, and he said it was from drinking too much nitro cold brew because he loved drinking nitro cold brew. And people were like, people are giving me crap in the comments about clearing my throat all the time, but I just can't help it. I think it's from just talking a lot too. Anyways, but it does just make me think of it. Anyways, the political savvy is something that I didn't learn probably for the first 30 years of my life, because I was like, no, the best man or woman wins. The best man or woman should get the job. The best man or woman, the best answer should be the case. What I've learned is that that is not always the case. You have to have some type of political strategy when it comes to your job, when it comes to just your team and that type of stuff, because not everybody is going to just be on board just because that you think or it is the best idea, because they might not want to do it just because it's the best idea. So like that's something I've learned over the past, I want to say like 5 years, that it makes a big difference. And I've tried to start making allies in the community and at schools to try and push fly bodies forward, because I was like, in the beginning, it's like, why wouldn't people want to work out? Why wouldn't people want to do mileage and stuff like that? It's good for your health. But then I realized that alone is just not enough good. And that's not enough for some people to be like, oh yeah, we should do this. But if you become friends with people and you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours a little bit, which it doesn't always sit with me super well, but sometimes you got to play the game that way. Right. I know that's a long rant, but political
No,
savvy,
it's good.
political savvy is something that I've learned that has a big impact.
Yeah. I feel similar to you that there's been times in my life where I've like just thought, oh, that's unfair that merit-based stuff or like this should just work. But then what I've come to appreciate is that all of these systems, like whether or not you talk about like a school system or, in the case of fly bodies with the organizations of these private schools and kind of like what are these big incentives that they have as an organization, but also like the individual incentives and kind of what they care about and value. That it's all about just like people and relationship management.
Mhm.
And I know that that can seem like a little bit like, ooh, I'm manipulating somebody, but you're not. Like you're actually just like recognizing that there are people everywhere along this whole chain in an organization that in order to be heard and to be in the right room, that you actually just need to like account for that and plan ahead for the fact that people are going to be irrational and like hey, why is this person like not returning my phone calls? And it's like they were so interested before, but it's like, oh, well, what this person really cares about is they're spending too much time on this other thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to acknowledge that and then like bring them this prepackaged solution and say, hey, I have this thing for you. Hey, I noticed that you really care about this. Like, I think this thing might help. What do you think about that? And they're like, oh, thank you, because you actually understood what they really wanted. And that's more like seems like a tactical thing, but like thinking about who are all the stakeholders, who's involved, what can I do to have influence with these people, who should I talk to first, who's like more influential within this organization that I need to kind of like bring on board, who are people that might never be on board that I actually just need to like manage the relationship with.
Sure.
All those things are like really valuable skills that um, I have in my past ignored at my own detriment.
Yeah. No, and to your point on the tactical thing about recognizing what people kind of want, but like I'll give the example is this week I talked to a school, St. Francis, about doing a mileage challenge, right? And the guy who ran the mileage challenge last year, his name's Tim. He used all he did was use a Google sheet, and he told people to take screenshots of their mileage, and then they put their information in the Google sheet. So understanding that, I think, and I kind of talked to him about it. I was like, are you wanting to run this thing again? And he was like, yeah, no, I kind of like doing it. So I was like, oh, well then you can just use FlyFit to run your mileage challenge, and I'll let you do it, right? Like usually we run the mileage challenge in FlyFit, and we've talked about like a turnkey solution because people want to feel important. They want to feel like they're bringing something to their staff or faculty that they're like, oh, I'm going to get some recognition for this. So it's just like, to your point of like understanding what people actually want and not saying like, oh, since we can't run the FlyFit challenge for you, we're not going to let you use our tool. But no, like this will
Yeah.
help us be more integrated. And so then people can get on the app and blah, blah, blah. Anyways.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think, I mean, you definitely have shown me this over the past year that um, if this is a political thing, right? It's like who like is establishing that they have value in an organization, and if you can set somebody up for success, like this is like a great. It's not manipulative because it's like, hey, I'm getting value out of this, but I want this person to be seen as the winner or the one who brought the value. They had the great idea, and like the ego suppression of like, yeah, I'm enabling this person to succeed in what they want. And then in the end, like Flybody's gets a loyal customer, they generate some revenue, and it's actually less work on your plate because you've given somebody a win for them. You gave them a win, and you don't even have to be involved in the credit taking whatsoever. You're just like, I just enabled this thing to happen, and you're accomplishing the mission of Fly Bodies while somebody is feeling like it was really their win,
Oh, totally. And
which is great. And
it
yeah,
is. And you have to, so, and then I take a step back, and I appreciate you saying that, is because like, if you think about what the overall vision is, it's like, hey, our
yep,
mission, our vision is to help people get in better health. So if they're like, hey, we just want to use this, but we don't want to use you to do it, it's like, okay, well, you're satisfying the overall mission. Like I might not be
yep,
making, the extra $500 in the short term, but since like you said, having a loyal customer, bringing them on board and stuff like that is like, is equating to making steps towards the bigger vision if you have to take a step back in the tactical like area or operational area. Um, so yeah, man, no, I think that's strategic thinking, man. It takes time, right? Like, and I don't think I'm an expert at it. I mean, and a lot of times too, here's what I'll say is, and we've talked about this, Garrett, is that you don't necessarily know the work you're doing is the exact right option. You until like in the moment, you don't want a result, right? You don't know resulting, but in the moment, I had the data to make this decision. I made this decision. And then at the end, you go, okay, that worked out the way I thought it did, or it didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out, right? And that's tough because at the end of the day, most people just care about the result, right? I care
hmm
about the result. You care about the result. Most people just care about the result. So it's tough because I lean more in my life more towards, and it might change over time because I think people lean less towards it, but I lean more towards action, and then after the fact, uh, rehashing what happened and saying, okay, we took action. And the reason why I bring this up is because like um, we did a mileage challenge in July this past year. And I think, and I had this conversation with Sean, he was like, he didn't really understand why we were doing mileage challenges for free for like 75, 80 people. And I was like, dude, we wanted to test out some features, also bring more people on board. Also, we don't know what we don't know, and we're going to learn more about challenges, right? So sometimes I think, to your point, like you want to have time to think about things strategically, but taking action is super helpful because that allows you to have more evidence to then
yeah,
make more decisions along with that strategic thinking, because like
Yep.
analysis
Yep.
by paralysis is tough. You get on that and you go, oh man, I don't know what to
Yeah.
do here.
Yeah, no, so to that point, there's I think it's Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He wrote a Black Swan, Skin in the Game, some of these bigger books. So how do you feel about this guy? He has a great quote that's like, "Our IQ is 1,000 when we are taking action." Meaning, you can hypothesize and strategize, but the only way, kind of like what this whole video got me thinking, is like strategy is like a science-based method,
Mm,
right? I have this hypothesis. I'm going to plan ahead. I'm going to think about it. And then I'm going to execute violently and just like try to take advantage of whatever I see as the opportunity. And then you need to reflect
totally.
and then put it back in. But um, I think that the balance there is important, right? So I
Yes,
mentioned earlier about leaders, anyone who wants to think strategically needs to schedule time for themselves to do it, or else you won't because you're going to get overwhelmed by the day-to-day task, the nearest alligator to the boat, if you will. But then there also needs to be some cutoffs to say, hey, by this date, we're going to make a decision, the best decision we have with the current information that we have available, and we're going to go forward with it. And then learn and listen and pay attention.
hmm,
That's where that pattern recognition comes in to say, hey, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? It's very difficult to like overcome all the biases that we have in terms of like, I want this to work, and fall in love with the solution rather than the problem there.
for
Like,
sure.
oh, this leaderboard in fly bodies, the challenges, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah,
You mean Sean sitting there like, this is amazing, great feature.
yeah,
And then we got a lot of feedback to say, hey, some people, amazing, they loved it.
mhm,
And then other people just stopped walking and visiting the app because they were like, I'm embarrassed by seeing my numbers so
100%.
low. And so it's like, okay, well, we were right and wrong.
Yeah,
How do you move on from there? How do you reflect and then modify the strategy to drive engagement for everyone when it comes to the mileage challenges, for example?
exactly.
So it's a balance is huge in this
Huge.
whole strategy thing,
And the
that you can't just
reflecting.
sit back and yeah, reflecting is the learning process.
Exactly.
Or else if you're not learning from it, not scheduling time to learn, then you're not actually going to become a better strategic thinker or decision maker.
Right. And because I could have been like, no, like I don't care about the people that aren't walking. We want the people that are walking to be like, to continue doing it because they love it. Like I could have been closed-minded, right? You want to have a growth mindset and say like, oh, how do we make this better and help people? And so that the people that are crushing it, they're still feeling good about themselves and love it. But then it brings up the lower half to say, oh, like I'm enjoying this more now, right? And that's like iterating, always iterating on what you're doing and making those small iterations. Super, super helpful. I mean, I had something. So we're hitting the 1 hour mark. I feel like we can talk about one more thing and then we'll cut it here. But one of the other things I thought about this week, what I don't know why it popped into my head, maybe because my fiance and I talk about having kids now, and I know Garrett has a 1 year old. Shout out Sloan, birthday like last two
This
weeks
past
ago.
month,
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago,
a
yeah.
couple weeks ago. And I was just thinking, I was like, man, I don't know. I think I was working out, and I was like, what is the one? If you could teach your child one trait that they absolutely would carry with them for the rest of their lives, what would it be? And I asked my fiance the same question. And so I asked Garrett in a text, I think pretty soon after we had our conversation. I was like, hey, I want to discuss this. And so I'm curious what you said. I think I told you what mine was, but I'm
Yeah.
curious of what yours is, of like
Yeah.
what you would want Sloan to take with her from you.
Yeah, so it was pretty easy for me to pick, and the reason why is it's something that I'm working on is growth mindset. And so you hit on that. It's kind of like now like pop science, like people know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, growth mindset is this belief that you can improve and change and grow. And what that does is in any situation is it opens up opportunities because it's like the willingness to try again, the willingness to try something different, the willingness to just like not take it so hard and result and say, oh my gosh, I failed, I'm bad, versus that didn't work. Huh, what could I try differently next time to make it work? It's like this whole like shift of like shutting down versus trying, and it like opens up opportunities that I would hope that Sloan would never shut herself down,
Hmm.
right? Never closed doors for herself through this thought process that like, not delusional to say I can do anything, but like, hey, I'm going to continue to try and work. And that will just like spill over into so many areas of friendships, relationships, jobs, making those wise decisions throughout time to continue to move forward in life because she honestly believes that she has the ability to learn and grow and change versus feeling closed off that whatever happens as a result of her actions is a measure of her as a person.
Growth mindset, man. No, that I love it. I love it. And there's a book, right? By is it Carol Dweck or
Carol Dweck's mindset.
Mindset? The book is called Mindset.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Highly recommend. It talks about growth mindset. And no, I think that's such a good trait, man. Like you said, it spills over to everything that you do in life. And it's important, right? Because as just like strategic thinking, just like anything, you want to take information in and have the ability to change your opinion, change
Yeah.
your mind and stuff like that. That's awesome. I like growth mindset. Mine, and I basically hard work, learning how to work hard and resilience. I guess kind of like they're one in this. They're not one and the same, but like working hard and resilience. And the reason why I say that is because in anything that you do, you're not going to be able to understand it when you first do it, usually. Like anything new, right? Anything new that you do, and this, it kind of ties into the growth mindset of like being willing to learn, being open to learn, but like understanding that it's going to be tough. Like doing tough things biologically is really good for us because it builds up our dopamine levels more. It makes us appreciate more things with our serotonin. It creates like internally a lot of things good happen by doing things that are hard because it allows you to understand that, hey, I appreciate the hard work that I'm doing on the back end. Like we don't always understand like why we're going through basic training, why people are making us wake up at 5 or 5:30. But then you have a greater appreciation and you're willing to be resilient, right? Like that's where I have found like fly bodies technically started like in like 2018, 2019, technically. And we've gone through so many ups and downs, so many different types of waves during that time. And I've had 3 different developers build the app. I have, made contracts with people where they cut the contract. I've, built things up. And for me, I'm like, man, if my, like, and I learned very early on, like about hard work, because my dad was a very hard worker. And so, doesn't mean he always made the right decisions, doesn't mean he was the best at what he did, but I could always see him like working really hard. And I was like, gosh, like at the end of the day, I just want my child to be a hard worker because people recognize that and you're willing to continue to do that and to be resilient and not just give up because you're not going to be good at a lot of things. And it's going to take a long time usually, like in relationships as well. Being able to continue to work in your marriage or in friendships and stuff like that is hard work. Like doing this podcast is hard work, like scheduling the time, getting ready, putting notes down, doing that stuff. It's not super easy. Like we could get on here and, shoot the shit, but like we get on here because we want to be prepared and provide value. So that was my thing is like hard work. There's something about it and not just hard work just to do hard work, but like being, precise with your hard work and then also doing hard
Yeah.
work. And then sometimes doing hard work just to do hard work. Like, because it flexes that muscle. It flexes that muscle. There's times in the military where they said, hey, take those canteens or take those things of water, put them on this side of the room. Okay, now take them on this side of the room and put them on this side of the room. And it's just like, why did we do that? There's no reason. There was no reason. It was like, and you think about it, like, why carry your bag in your left hand as a freshman? They probably, I don't know if they do that anymore. I'm not sure, but they don't do it anymore. But it's like one of those things that you look back and you're like, dude, I remember that. I remember having to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a perspective aspect there that is behind hard work and resilience that it's like it's really easy to be cynical and say this is meaningless. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to tolerate any silly nonsense, but if you are required to do something or it's just like there's something that's worth doing, it's going to be difficult. And internally, having that perspective that it is worth it to do hard things because it is worth it of itself,
Mm-hmm.
you can learn something, you can like spin it, you can have that mindset of how you view the benefit of this thing that like with the water jug thing, it's like, hey, they're not going to break me. They're not going to make me give up on this. And that's just
Yes.
like, I'm going to show how much courage and strength that I have. I'm going to get a better workout in. I know that I'm going to be able to like conquer this thing. There's just like a whole wealth of internal joy that you can build from just liking hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, versus like it's kind of like people like say like, well, optimism is not going to get you up to the top of a mountain. It's like, well, you're probably going to enjoy yourself a lot more versus
Exactly.
like making it hard on yourself by saying, oh, this is so difficult. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this. It's going to make it a whole hell of a lot easier if you're okay. Hey, let's go after it, right? If we know we got to do this, I'm going to do it as hard as I possibly
Yeah.
can and enjoy it better.
And
But just owning the situation.
100%. And like, and to your point, like recognizing it's going to be hard. Like first be like, hey, this is going to be hard. Cool. I, I going into it knowing it's gonna be hard. Like I've always said, and I'm about to get married, but like I've said that probably marriage and being with somebody for 50, 60 years is probably one of the toughest things out there. So going out there and saying like, hey, I know this is going to be tough, and understanding that and being like, okay, I know this is going to be tough. So I know it's going to take hard work. So like,
Mhm.
instead of going into it and saying, man, we love each other, man, this is going to be easy, blah, blah, blah. And then when it does get hard, you're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Something's wrong here, or like if you don't expect it to be difficult, like, oh, well, maybe we're not meant for each other. And that's not a comment on people like
Exactly.
that give up in relationships,
No,
but like it's harder than you expect it is.
right. Exactly.
And so acknowledging that I think is really
For
important up
sure.
front.
And if you're going into the academy or if you're at the academy or if you're doing anything and it's hard, just take a step back, like you said, and reflect on it and say, you know what? I underestimated how hard this was going to be. And now I can kind of move forward. But those were two things. My fiance said hers was gratitude. And I like that.
Mm,
That's a good.
I like
I
that.
love the gratitude one too because I think that's
Mm,
super important to be able to step back and say, man, I really appreciate what I have and what I've.
yeah,
Not everybody
that's
gets to
good.
do that sometimes, but anything else, man, dude? This has been a good one. I feel like we hit some great
Yeah, no,
topics.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Well,
real.
have you just last thing? Have you started Nexus, the book that I sent? Have you?
Oh, sorry. Austin sent me a book for my birthday, and I have not started that book. I'm working through another one right now, Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg.
Great book. I haven't read that
Um,
one yet, but
yeah,
that'll be my next
no,
one.
it's quite good. There's a lot there to unpack. So maybe we'll do like a what's on your bookshelf thing
For
next
sure.
time. But yeah, thank you for the gift. I'm very grateful for that. It's on my
Dude, no,
list.
yeah, you've got you. It's like you don't have anything on your plate, so I figure
I got nothing going on
just
over here.
just shove
Not
some
busy
more
at
on it.
all.
Well, that's all we got, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, thanks for listening. Adios,
Yeah.
adios.